everyone, and welcome to the Balanced Bodies Blueprint. I am your host, Vinny Russo.
And I'm your co-host, Dr. Erin Stansfield.
And we're shifting gears from all the conventional fitness narrative you hear on most fitness podcasts, as our main emphasis lies in preventative healthcare, adopting a holistic approach to nutrition, and challenging the traditional views on various fitness topics.
Our mission with this podcast is to provide you with the information you need to achieve optimal health.
And on today's podcast, we have a very special guest. She's a doctor and an endocrinologist. She deals a lot with what she calls diabesity, which is what we're going to dive in today. Her name is Dr. Yasmine Elamir.
Hi.
I prefer Dr. Yaz. Are you okay with that?
We're gonna go with Dr. Yaz.
I'm great with that. That's
I
perfect.
love it.
It's
Great. Now
easy.
we have a funny story of how we met. So so I wound up putting out this post. It was about 2 weeks before you put out that post that kind of connected us in a mysterious way. But basically what happened was it was my post just rebranded with your branding. And I kind of called you out a little bit on it, and you were very busy, so you wound up getting me like a few hours later. But you want to explain to the audience sort of what happened with how we connected?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm predominantly more on YouTube. I do long form for my patients. That's kind of how that started. And so basically, I hired an editor who's supposed to kind of dice it up, take quotes from the long form, and then kind of put it on the other social media channels, basically because we're busy, right? And so I don't check over really anything from there unless I get a direct message or something. I don't really, have time to look, but I do check over my long form like meticulously. And
Yeah.
so as soon as I saw your message, I said, whoa, I said, this is the exact same post.
Yeah.
So
Even the
needless to
caption was
say,
like word for word. And I was like, at least give me credit. Come on. What's going
yeah,
on here?
just share the
Yeah.
post. And
Yeah.
it's so funny too, because like when I do my own like posts, which usually involve my kids in some form, that's how you can always tell if I did the post, my kids are in there. And
Yeah.
then, but anyways, I'll always it's natural, you just give credit to whoever did it. It's like a good way to meet other people and like share their message too. Anyways, long story short, that editor was fired immediately.
Yeah.
There's definitely, I guess you get what you pay for, right? I definitely hired offshore someone to help me dice and everything like that. And yeah, I'm
Well, as
still,
as a busy physician, I can understand one that it takes a lot of effort to be on social media, and we appreciate your presence there
Yeah.
because we have similar messaging. And not only that, but like I think it's good that you're actually hiring out to get your message across, and because more doctors really need to be on social
Yeah.
media. I feel like actually, giving out good information, especially endocrinology. It's, a specialty on its own, and so many people struggle. So I'm just glad that even it's a funny way that we connected, but I'm glad you're out there trying to give good information to patients. So I appreciate that.
oh no. And I'm thankful for you guys. I was like profusely apologizing. I
Yeah.
was just so embarrassed, and
Well,
you guys were so nice. And then you invited me on your podcast. So I
well,
said, of
that's I was like
course.
listen, why don't you just make up for it and just come on our podcast? And you're like, yes, okay, fine, deal. And here we are today.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's great. So yeah, funny story on how we connected. But why don't you give an introduction to about yourself to our listeners so they know a little bit more about you?
Yeah, so basically, I'm an endocrinologist and obesity specialist. I also practice internal medicine, and I'm also board certified in health coaching. So, my background is I'm a diabetic who once was suffering from really high blood sugar and obesity. So, I grew up in a family of all diabetics, and basically a family who suffered from what I call diabesity. And so my brother, my dad, and all his side are the diabetics, plus those suffering from obesity. And then my mom's side is more heart disease and obesity. And so they got married and raised two kids who end up suffering from the same thing. And it wasn't for lack of trying. They really did try their best that we wouldn't have to go through this path. They put us on the original Atkins diet. My dad was chasing me around with Byetta shots. He's a physician as well. He was really the first person I feel like who was really on that, GLP route. Before I think anyone else was. He was 2005, like on it. And then,
Yeah.
Awesome. That's great.
yeah, so basically, long of the short of it is, I was always a competitive tennis player. I was able to maintain, maybe I was overweight on the BMI scale, but I had a lot of muscle and really, I got away with eating a lot for
Mhm.
a long time. And then basically, when I went to med school, the plan was always for my brother and I to work together with my dad in the practice. I wound up getting married, and residency, you're working overnight. I have severe scoliosis. So my back kind of goes like this in a
Yeah.
loop. And so when I gained weight, I wound up needing steroid injections
Mm.
often. And so I basically became pregnant, had gestational diabetes that didn't go away. And then I said, okay, I literally switched my research immediately. I said, instead of going to pulmonology, I'm going to go into endocrinology, which was lucky because during fellowship was COVID pandemic. So I will
Wow.
say, Pulm Crit would have been pretty tough.
Yeah, yeah. You saved yourself, maybe.
I saved myself there. And then, yeah, so that's how I kind of got into this. And then once I did endocrinology, I wanted to study obesity medicine for selfish reasons and selfish reasons alone. And then, honestly, even though I had like known the knowledge, I really couldn't put it into action. So I needed to get coached. And so that's where, personal trainer, nutritionist, health coaching, honestly, and a lot of therapy and psychiatry to really get over my food addiction. And so that's how I got into health coaching and really wanting to help people in that way. And that's kind of how I formed the way I do my practice. So yeah, so that's my
I
story.
love your story because it's very rare. Some of our patients come to us and like, you can't relate, but you literally can relate. You walk the walk and talk the talk, and have been there personally, and um, can understand how complex obesity might be. And I think that is something that we underestimate in the general population, right? We just think if we can work harder and work out more, and some people even see some of the medications as, well, I gave up, or I'm giving into something, and it's so much more complex. And to be honest, I'm very grateful that there are medications out there that can help people, that are struggling their whole lives, because you're right. Like, without some of these meds, you need psych, you need nutrition. I'm not that you don't need that stuff anyway, but it's
Right.
it's a huge undertaking to actually, um, sustain a healthy weight and sustain a healthy diet.
Yeah. 100%.
100%. And I think it's one of those things, people who do it, they put a lot more thought into it than I think people understand.
Yeah.
I think they don't think it should require that much work. But if you think about it, people are either maybe they're trying to achieve a certain athletic goal, right? The same goes for like anything else. But for people who are just trying to manage their genetics in this obesogenic and toxigenic environment we're in, it takes a lot of work to do so.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but it can be very simple and structured and planned. And that's kind of really what I needed to figure out for myself.
Yeah, and that's where, I mean, I feel like that's where physicians, where there's a multidisciplinary team, can help out.
Yep.
And a lot of people
Yeah,
don't know that, unfortunately. So
that's
that's
the
why we're doing
best.
this.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So I'm gonna say you coined the term diabesity. I'm gonna say that's all you. Do you want to
No,
explain sort of what that is, and why do you think
yes.
it better describes modern obesity than just calling it a weight problem?
Right. So basically, the term was coined back in the 70s, and it was because they did studies looking at patients who, when they gained weight or started to, overeat and then gain weight, they looked at their insulin markers, their triglycerides, their sugar, everything. And they saw directly that that's when they figured out weight and insulin resistance were related. And so that was when the term first came out, and that's the only relationship they discussed.
Hmm.
And then in the future, obviously, we've learned it's a two-way street. There's a very complex interplay between the two, and they feed each other. And so I don't think it's better than saying maybe weight per se or someone suffering from obesity. But diabetes affects a lot of us. And so if you are someone who suffers from insulin resistance or diabetes and your weight at the same time, I like using that term because you have to approach it that way. You
Yeah.
can't approach it the same way someone who doesn't have insulin resistance would approach weight loss. Because if you do that, you're missing out on big drivers of gaining weight. So, big picture, So that's why I like the term, and why I use it often.
Do you believe that most people struggling with weight today, do you believe that they have some sort of some degree of insulin resistance, even if they're not diabetic?
No, although I actually intuitively would think so, just because we know, right, when we, have a lot of sugar that leads to weight gain, most of the food is highly processed and usually full of it, right? And so we could see how that would be. But, and on the flip side of that, how weight leads to insulin resistance, that visceral fat,
Mm.
and everything like that. So, but they've done studies, so they've looked at it. And so 10 to 30% of people, who are suffering from obesity don't have any insulin resistance, at least in those studies. So I wouldn't say everyone. And then there's also, the metabolically healthy. There are that percentage of people who have, a higher BMI, way more, but it's not really affecting their blood work per se. And so, and those are very lucky few, and that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
I'm jealous.
Can you
Yeah.
kind of explain mechanistically how insulin resistance actually drives overhunger and kind of give us like a broad stroke view?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So basically, when we have insulin resistance, big picture, our pancreas, which secretes insulin, basically is supposed to tell the muscle, uptake the glucose, right? And store into the muscle, and then or it can go to the fat for storage, fuel storage, or the liver, and deal with all of those kind of pathways. But when that stops working, the muscle doesn't listen to the insulin, and so we wind up increasing our blood glucose levels. Now the problem with that is when we have high glucose levels, we have to and we can't make the insulin work or listen. The cells aren't listening. We have to keep increasing our insulin levels. The problem with that is multifold. One, when we have high insulin levels, that leads to more fat storage. And then when we have high insulin levels, it leads to the sugar going up and down. So if you look at a continuous glucose monitor of someone who suffers from diabetes, it's usually not a straight line unless they're sipping like a little bit of cola all day. It
Mm.
looks like this,
Mm.
and so obviously we have natural variations in our blood glucose and we need those. But that big swing when we go down with our blood glucose after insulin finally, succumbs at high sugar, it leads to ghrelin, the hunger hormone, shooting through the roof. So often my diabetics, I will know right away, even before I do the labs, what's going on because I'll ask them, hey, after dinner, do you feel like you need to go to the fridge 3 hours later
Mm.
and have a snack before bed? Like, if you don't, you'll die kind of feeling. And they're like, yes, exactly. And that's what that is. It's basically that sugar goes up, the sugar drops down, and then ghrelin, the hunger hormone, shoots through the roof, and you're at the fridge 3 hours later and not staying as full as someone else who should be able to last 4 to 5 hours without feeling hungry.
Interesting.
So it's really a tough thing. It's almost basically impossible to lose weight if you have high insulin levels and high sugar as someone who's insulin resistant.
Yeah.
Not the same for people who are not. So that's why,
There's
although
a
people
big
don't like
difference
that,
there.
a key
That's
difference, it
yeah.
causes overhunger. And then moreover, when you're used to having to basically eat right away, your brain is so smart. It's like, this is the cue. So the minute that sugar drops, it's also a craving. It's dopamine. So it not only is over hunger, but then there's also this over craving kind of thing going on there.
Yeah,
So
there's
it's
neurotransmission that's involved in this, and it's not um, so straightforward, right? Very complex loops that we're talking about here. Um,
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on one thing that you said. So you were talking about obviously insulin being going up and driving glucose into the cell. A lot of people that don't have diabetes use continuous glucose monitors. They
mm,
try to avoid all types of insulin spikes, and I'm someone where I'm just like, if you don't have that problem, then the natural insulin spike and blood glucose spike and drop, that's natural, that's normal. You don't have to try to avoid that. And do you have
correct.
a stance on that?
Correct. Yeah, just correct. No, I'll definitely give more on that. Yeah, I think here's the problem too. We are in an environment, like if you look at the Super Bowl, right? They literally target us to think about food all the time.
Oh yeah.
The commercials, everything. And now they're targeting people, and I think it's because of the GLP, big rise that now everyone's seeing sugar, glucose, and these monitors that have been around, by the way, right? But now everyone's selling them and doing it in this way. And it's just not right to make people think about food so analytically, like what's the best diet, or, carnivore this or that, and, just fasting forever and these kind of things. And that's just not necessary to really reach a lot of goals. And if you look at, I always use examples of bodybuilders. I'll never do it because of how much they would actually have to eat to be able to build muscle and get that lean physique. It's so hard. And they're not watching every ounce of carbs. They have to eat a lot of carbs, and we get into this society now where everyone's on a monitor. Everyone thinks they should, not eat carbs and avoid insulin levels. And that's just crazy. We were made by God or whatever you believe to be designed for this to work for that reason. Insulin is supposed to go up and down. Glucose is supposed to go up and down. It's just a diabetic. The way I explain it to my patients is if you look at their glucose curve, it just stays up way longer than it should. And a non-diabetic, you'll see it just goes up and it almost looks like a pyramid, a sharp pyramid, and comes right down as it sort of should, but miniature, not these big mounds.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's ridiculous, basically.
I think it's funny because our new surgeon, well, potential surgeon general, right, sells these glucose monitors as a side business and promotes them for general population. And I should mention she never finished residency and she is not an endocrinologist, so would not follow her her recommendation there.
And it's dangerous because if
Yeah.
you don't know how to interpret those CGMs, you're going to think you have a lot of problems you don't. Really. And even most, I would say doctors, even in practice, don't necessarily know the nuances of it. I remember it was the hardest part of training is really understanding what's real, what's not on these glucose monitors. And the worst part is we have testing more than the A1C. We have a 2-hour glucose tolerance test. And if any woman's ever had a baby, they know because them or their best girlfriend failed it the first time. I mean, right? We have a very sensitive measure covered by insurance that takes 2 hours to tell you probably the best way to tell you if you have insulin resistance, right? And so it's ridiculous that people should have to, one, pay out of pocket, two, risk dangerous measures by not having proper physicians trained in this to help them interpret this.
Yeah.
It's
Well, and
ridiculous.
I think it's so dangerous too, even like as a physician, I wouldn't give advice to a diabetic. Like I would always refer out and say, listen, you need to see an endocrinologist. This is not my area of expertise. And so to even speak or give advice as somebody who, potentially didn't finish residency and did a surgical residency is crazy to me. But anyway, I digress into politics.
No, I know. It's probably not, I know. I'm with you though, 100%, because the more you know what you didn't know. And that's where training, right, in residency and then clinical practice really tells you what matters and what doesn't matter, what moves the needle, what doesn't move the needle. And if you haven't done that, you can't understand the intricacies. No way.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, I wanted to, you were talking about hunger in your last paragraph that you just said before. And I remember through your content, you talked about hunger loops. So can you just describe what they are and what you mean by them and how glucose swings reinforce them over time?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have basically two pathways. So we have a homeostatic hunger pathway that is, our natural response. When I'm hungry, I need to eat. And then we have this kind of hedonistic craving pathway, which is basically, I want to eat. I want this, right? And back in the day, when we were cavemen, or I don't know, don't quote my exact timeline, but very long time ago, we used to live in like the caves, right? And we had to hide from lions and predators and whatever. And we had a really, really strong, homeostatic or hunger pathway, right? And craving pathway. And so we were designed that we needed quick energy. And so we were designed to have certain time intervals that we would need to go out of the cave to eat. If not, we would naturally starve. And so thank God we had those pathways back then. The problem is, and then moreover, we've had this craving pathway to desire carbs because that's quick energy, quick grab berries, go back to safety. And we needed that back then. But now if I look at like my street and I look at both ways, there's a Dunkin' Donuts on every corner. And I really just don't need anything telling me to eat.
Yeah.
It's like surrounding me. And so the problem is that with glucose, basically back in the 50s, right? Sugar used to be expensive, then it became inexpensive. And now they put sugar or some sugar derivative, right? And not going into a debate on which glucose is the best, right? And these kind of things. But big picture, it became very much everywhere. And now all our foods are very hyper palatable, cravings. So from a hunger pathway or hunger loop, when we have really high glucose levels, we oversecrete insulin way before we're even diagnosed with prediabetes and diabetes. And so that's why one of the most common, symptoms a pre-diabetic will have even before diagnosis is low sugar. And so what happens is when we have high sugar meal or just maybe only carbs in the meal, something very simple like chips or dessert, and we do that over and over, our body starts to oversecrete insulin thinking it needs to. And then when that happens, our sugar does eventually drop from baseline. So when we're used to having it high all the time, our body, when it drops to even normal, so I'm not talking low drop, I'm talking just even normal, will think it's starting to go low. And so it literally physically will drive stress response and other hunger hormones to make you eat more. Now the problem is that not only did that happen, but then our dopamine goes up and down that quickly as well. And honestly, it's one of the most addicting things. Nothing, not sex or cigarettes will even match that kind of drop for a lot of us. So when we have that, we have this over craving and over hunger. The problem with all of that is when we do this over and over again, our brain is telling us to do it, but moreover, we're starting to store fat. And that fat leads to inflammation. And that inflammation then goes back and literally will affect our insulin signaling. And so that fat will also lead to downregulating adiponectin, an insulin sensitizer. And so again, we become more insulin resistant. And then moreover, when we gain, fat or adipokines, right? That adipokine hypothesis, not only are we becoming less insulin sensitive, but we're also and inflammatory. But our leptin, which is supposed to make us satiated or feel, not as hungry, becomes resistant just like the insulin. So we need to eat more to feel more satisfied. And we have our insulin resistance at the same time. So that's where the fat is directly contributing to the insulin, cause it over hunger, over craving. And then at the same time, our insulin being high, that over glucose is leading to that fat storage. So they completely are, related that way.
That's
That's the
one
loops.
crazy negative feedback loop.
It's
Seriously,
crazy.
it's
And
insane.
it's
Wow.
intricate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, just real quick. So when you were talking about just constantly eating, something that's, carb, just carbs like chips, or maybe it's toast a lot, whatever, and you're picking on it. It's almost like you were talking about like what I see with clients with like metabolic adaptation, where their baseline will change. So by them continuously eating that, it drives the glucose high. So that becomes their new baseline. So what you were saying is when it goes back to normal, they feel like, oh shit, my blood sugar's low. Your body's like, blood sugar's low, go get more food. Is that
Yep,
correct? Yeah. Okay.
exactly. We call it pseudo hypoglycemia.
Oh wow.
So what that means is we feel like the sugar's low, but it's not. And we can even have physiological symptoms like feeling shaky,
Yep.
sweaty, just like the real deal. And the only way you can differentiate the difference is with basically a finger stick. Otherwise, you really can't tell the difference. And so it's that, and then that same pathway. The brain is so smart, it adapts, it's so efficient.
Yep.
So it knows this pattern's going to happen. And that's what drives the craving even before you're about to think about eating food. It's absolutely bonkers. And once you realize that, the reason why Weight Watchers doesn't work for me, right, compared to someone else, my mom used to take me to the original Weight Watcher meetings, like the ones in person before it was online.
Yeah.
And it worked for a few months, but the reality is those pathways are so strong. And the cavemen, right? We evolve, but slowly.
Yeah.
But the food evolved way faster. Our environment has changed so much in the past 75 years that us evolving will never catch up to that. And so our genes will not change in time. And that's why we know obesity is on the rise and so is diabetes. And it's for that reason, because we're not evolving as fast as our environment. And so it makes it very difficult.
I just have a practical, like clinical question. In your clinical practice, are you then advising people when they get into these, hunger loops and these cravings? Are you doing finger sticks, or are you using like CGMs for the specific population? And if you are, is there something that they're looking for on that data readout, as a patient?
Yes. So, big picture, when I explain this to patients, I don't necessarily explain it like I explained it to you just now. What they really need to understand is if you're suffering from diabetes, you have to fix the sugar so you aren't over hungry. I explained it just like that. So things aren't going up and down. And then at the same time, we need to do the normal practical things we have to do to lose weight, right? If you don't do it at the same time, one loop will fall into the other. So I put a monitor on them immediately. I'm very lucky. My reps keep me loaded. And so while I'm doing the prior auth to get it approved for the patient, I'm putting a monitor on right away. And then they're also getting finger sticks. We use finger sticks for when I know things are not right on the monitor. So, big
So you
picture.
actually, I guess it's like a secondary data point to confirm. See, and I think this is missed, like, and when people just put these monitors on, right? You're actually
Yes.
getting true data there.
Yes, and you can't just look at data and be like, oh, it's up or down. There's a systematic way to do it, and there's a practical way to do it. And so, right, when they designed these kind of guidelines of 2 hours postprandial glucose should be under 180, right? One of the guidelines will say that's not practical. You're telling someone eat breakfast at 8, then 10 a.m. in the middle of your day, check your sugar 2 hours before lunch. It's just not like a practical way to be. So no, I explain it to them in a very like practical way because what they need to know to make this work for them. So I actually have my patients look at their monitor first thing in the morning, and then after breakfast before the next meal. So say example, they wake up in the morning and they eat breakfast and their sugar in the morning is 130, okay? Or yeah, it doesn't really matter, 130. So then before lunchtime, right, depending on what they ate, I always have them track it, which is great because the monitors do let you, like freestyle, they let you track everything. And so lunchtime, are we more than 40 points above where we started fasting?
Interesting. Yeah.
If we are, then that means either we have to change something with the macros, maybe the order, how much carbs, or maybe walking after a meal, something like that short term. Long term, how are we going to make you more insulin sensitive? And then if you're like, listen, I don't want to do this, this is not a moral thing. I can give you medication, no problem, right? But that's what they basically are looking at pre and post meal. And then that post meal, I do it right before the meal. The reason I do it right before the meal is because it makes them think before they eat.
Yep.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So
So it's a
instead of
psychological.
Yeah.
yeah, instead of hyper obsessing all day, right, with this 2 hour postprandial, where it honestly, most diabetics, we suffer, a lot of us, from eating disorders, we suffer from feeling anxious, depressed, and it's because we're constantly thinking about food. And it's so hard because we kind of have to.
Mhm.
And so, anyways, I do it right before the meal. So they are cognizant of what they're about to eat after. I always joke to them, you'd have to be like a masochist to have a sugar of 300 and then eat a huge bowl of pasta after meeting with me. And they're like, absolutely. So we always say, when they come in, I take the monitor, I look at it and I said, okay, what'd you eat the day before? Well, generally I eat this. No, no, no. What did you eat yesterday? And they know.
I see something here.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have it? So is that your rule of thumb? Like, so if I'm your patient or whatever, and I'm taking my my measurement right before I eat this meal, and I'm not 40 points above where I was fasting, do I get to have carbohydrates? Like, how does that work?
Exactly. So we'll look at that meal and say, okay, well, how many carbs were in this meal, right? And then, okay, so depending on their goals, say they're
Mm.
on a lot of insulin, we'll keep it there, but then we start bringing down the insulin 10%, 20%. And so, right, if they stayed steady, I'll drop the insulin 20 percent. If it's going closer to that 40, I'll go 10%. I said, okay, try to maintain this. Let's see if we drop the insulin, if your body will respond. So that's how I wean people off medications.
Yep.
And then, contrary to popular belief, we do try to get people off
I
Mhm.
as
was
much
just
as we
gonna say,
can.
do you feel like insulin resistance can be improved upon? Like once you get a handle on what you're supposed to be eating, can you improve your own insulin resistance?
1,000%. Yes, you can. And so people get into big debates about remission versus reversal. But what you really need to understand is there's so many parts to insulin resistance, even more than just weight. So weight is a huge part. It's probably the biggest needle mover we know of.
Yep.
But there's so many other things at play. So yeah, when you do the right things and then you get really knowledgeable of understanding your patterns on your monitor, you're able to short-term tweak things, but then long-term tweak things that eventually will result in a better carb tolerance, an ability to eat a certain way. And the best way I explain it is this: if you have a car, right, and most cars run on gas, some run on super gas. And so I say the same thing about carbs. There's like gas, carbs, and then there's super gas. Well, we're diabetics. We run best on diesel
Yeah.
until we can like adjust our engine to be able to handle super gas more often.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I explain it. Super, am I saying super gas premium? I don't know. You
I
get
got
the
what you
idea.
mean. Yeah.
I'm not great at
So
analogies, I
real
guess.
quick about the insulin resistance. So one thing that I like to do with my clients and what she preaches all the time is having some form of resistance training.
Yeah.
How much does that go into helping improve insulin resistance?
I won't even start someone on a GLP until we do it because I tell them,
That's
um,
amazing.
Yes, I love that.
because,
That's a
and there's
great
a big
thing.
reason why I tell them, okay? I let them know this isn't like 100% true, but after this many years of treating people with this, you have a certain amount of window where that drug not only is going to help with the sugar, but is going to help you lose weight, like kind of a little bit more on autopilot, right?
Mm,
Before you kind of get used to the drug. And so the problem becomes if I put you on that and you lose weight, you're going to lose fat and some lean mass.
mm,
Well, we want to lose more fat than lean mass. So the
of
only way
course.
we can do that is resistance training and protein.
Yeah.
Resistance training being number like one on that list. And so it's really important, basically, at least 2 days a week, preferably 3 to 4, true resistance training. And so I try not to complicate it because they're in the office and it is so complicated. And I say, listen, go. You can go in even on YouTube if you need to. Not mine, because you'll never see me work out on YouTube. I'm not that lady. But you know what I mean? And I want you to get just even starting with just simple dumbbells until you feel comfortable, getting help that you probably it helps. It helps to obviously have a personal trainer, right? That's like a perfect world for everyone.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
joining an
yeah.
online program, something like this. But I said just lift until you feel a little bit like, wow, the last 2 reps would be difficult. And
Yep.
each month, am I doing more reps or is the weight going up? And if it's not,
Progressive
that means you're
overload.
not
Yeah.
pushing yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Progressive
Love it.
overload. Love that.
Love it.
Yeah, it's good to have like so a lot of the narrative is that doctors don't they just tell, fix your diet and go exercise. But it's great that you're like, hey, no, 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 we're gonna exercise. You need to
I
resist
love
train,
that.
and we're not gonna give you meds until you start.
And
Like, yeah.
Yeah, we do. And it's more, and I explain it to them. So my first visits, actually, my dad always complains my visits take too long. So maybe I'm doing something
I
wrong.
love
But
that.
yeah,
That's
there's
great.
a reason for that. I call it like the 4 commandments of weight loss, basically. You
Nice.
need, right, movement and resistance training, protein, water, sleep. And if you
Yeah.
don't have those four, it's really the engine's going to break down, and that's when willpower over is a problem. So I
Mhm.
like those. I call them the 4 commandments because they're all about abundance. There's no restriction in those four, right? Enough sleep, enough training, enough protein, enough movement, and enough water. If you don't do those things, the engine will break down, and you're going to become overhunger, overcrave, and the cycle's going to keep going.
I
So you
love
have
how
that's your base.
Yeah.
I love how you like when you phrase things, there's like a psychological element to it. Like you just said, like it's not restriction, it's abundance. And like just by switching it that way, it goes from I don't want to be restrictive to yeah, I would love to have more, you know?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love
And then
that.
you
It's real
crave it
psychological.
because
Yeah.
once you start feeling good and you don't have this fatigue, which is the number one symptom every diabetic or pre-diabetic has. Are you tired during the day? And they will always tell you there's some time of the day where there's an energy slump, 100%.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
And when you feel good, you crave it. You just
Mm,
want to go back. And you guys can probably attest. I mean, you guys lift more than me. So you guys can probably attest better than I can how good it feels, right? You crave it.
Oh
If you
yeah.
don't do it for a few days, you're in a
Yeah.
bad mood, right? I mean,
Oh yeah. Of course.
yeah.
please
And
listen
that's
to
what
her.
you want.
She used to have this thing with cardio. She just loves cardio.
Oh yeah.
She like it like frees her mind. It like stress and when she didn't doesn't happen
I think
that
it's
often
more
now.
psychological
But
thing. Yeah.
if she didn't do it and she didn't get like her run in to like kind of
Yeah.
relieve her
It's like
stress a little bit,
it's a high. Like when they talk about the runner's
she got a
high.
little angry. She was a little snippy. Yeah, what happened?
It's true. I can feel it in the morning. I get up in the morning and I'm thinking my husband's not going to get up in time, like to get the kids. Like I want us to be ready before the kids get up, right?
Right.
And then,
Yeah.
right, it just makes the whole morning easier. And so I used to, and this is where your thoughts have so much to do with it. My thought was like, oh, he's not getting up in time. And then I said, you know what? Right when I'm about to get stiffy, I go to this infrared Pilates class. I think, I don't know, with the winter, I like want the hot class or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And they have their strength training class, and I said, "That's it." I go 5 in the morning. I'm
That's
there, and I
awesome.
Yeah.
say,
Good
"That's
for
it."
you.
Before I like for what? Get my thoughts all messed up, and then I
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
good. I've trained. I come home, and I feel like just elated, and so it's
And
so important to change that.
even off of that, so like you feel good doing that, it makes you want to do other things
Yeah,
that make
it's
you feel good. So it's
yeah,
like you go get your workout in, and then it's like you're not even thinking about eating bad that day because you want to keep that
it's a
momentum going.
positive
So
reinforcement.
yeah, so you have this like snowball effect with one habit after
Yeah,
another, as build off of that and feel better.
yeah,
It's momentum. It's all about that momentum and motivation. And that's what, as a physician, that's all I care about getting my patients is I just need to get you a quick win. So if I
Mhm.
can get you, that's why I give them that monitor right away. If I can
yeah,
show them, you change one meal, look at your sugar.
Yeah.
You
right,
change these four habits, look how you feel,
Mhm.
right? And then the
yeah,
weight naturally comes
yeah.
very often. And then obviously, if we need to dig deeper and do other things, we do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That being said, I was just going to ask you so like if I come to your clinic and I'm struggling, let's say I'm a pre-diabetic and maybe at what point are you like, "Hey, we can put you on a GLP." Like what does your clinical stance on where GLPs fit in and or
Yeah.
do you get them better with their insulin resistance? Do you get them like on a nutrition plan first? Like what does that look like clinically?
Well, on my prior auth, it's definitely a nutrition plan first. No, I'm just kidding. And then put it in the water sources. No, all jokes aside, I tell my patients before we even start the conversation, because half the referrals I get are from, so certain physicians will refer people to me just because they know I know how to get it, approved,
I
right?
was
Because
just
they
gonna
do it so
say, I
much.
bet you get a lot of people that are like, being kind of, I'm a specialist, but I work with a lot of primary cares. I'm like, you need to go to your primary care. And some primary cares are like, I won't even touch these GLPs because they
Correct.
can't get insurance, they can't get prior authorization from insurance. And so they're often sending the patients to endocrinologists to get the insurance approval or authorization.
So yeah, so I do pre kind of judge my patient a little bit based on who's sending them over to a degree because I can tell them like, so did so and so discuss, these medications, and then we get into what needs to be done with those. But say I don't know, I really make it open. So I'm just gonna be honest, just because of everything in the news, and you could tell the minute I say that phrase, they have heard of it or they haven't. So we have to start with awareness, right?
Yeah, right.
So if they're like, wait, what's in the news? Manjaro's in the news? Like then it's
If they're
like,
like totally clueless, they've been under a rock.
yes. And those patients are actually kind of the easiest to work with because they don't have preconceived notions.
Yep.
They
Right.
haven't tried a lot. And
Mhm.
often it takes very little for them to get major results,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And then when we talk about, depending on their glucose levels, if they need medication, this or that, but it's definitely thrown into the conversation in some way, shape, or form. If they're like, yeah, I've heard of these, get me on these, then I was like, hey, this is how you're going to succeed. And we kind of just jump right into that. This is what you need to do. And then if you're willing to do those things, let's go. The next year and a half, like what's your goals? And we get right into it. And then if they're in between, that's when, and I think that's where, because of HIPAA, you can't really talk about other people, right? But you can talk statistics. And I talk about myself and my family all the time with these kind of things. And so I always tell them the story of my dad, my mom. My mom, she did the gastric bypass route. My dad did, the Byetta and like all the way up, Victoza, Trulicity, all the way up, the gauntlet on GLP, GIP combination, medications. And he's one of five. And so I get really into mortality kind of early. And not to scare people, but more to really alert them of why we care,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because, like, why do I care about a sugar being high or low? It's really the inflammation and the heart attack and stroke that follow, right? That's why I care. So
Right.
I tell them, my dad's one of five. He has one sister who works, with us in the practice. And then he had three brothers. They were all diabetic and died from heart disease, one from stroke, and one from end stage kidney
Wow.
disease.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so when you have this kind of history, my dad at 30 was on a high dose statin, NLGLP. There's no shame in that, right? And
Yeah,
so,
thank you. Thank you for saying that, especially with there's so much fear around statins, I feel like. In fact, recently, I don't know why. And it's so um I think that's where this misinformation comes in. And it's so important to understand like the overall risk here, like what you're really looking at. So please tell us more.
yeah, so I kind of get them into, okay, so with that in mind, what's your family history? Grandma, grandpa, when did they die? mom, dad, these kind of things, or if they're alive. And so they'll tell me, oh, well, you know what? My dad died, in his 50s, but he just died in his sleep. And there's that, awareness like, hey, that's probably a heart attack, at the end of the day, right? Or something that was sudden. And so your risk factor, I'm going to assume if we don't know, this is the risk.
Yeah.
Right. And so putting that into, play, that's how we look at things like their lipids, their glucose, and we're screening. And so we screen aggressively. So a lot of times they're already screened, but
Yeah, when they come to you. Just from a practical standpoint, and how difficult, can you talk about how difficult it is or how easy it is to get authorization, and maybe some of the clinical guidelines to get pre-auth from insurance for a GLP?
yes. So yeah, it's definitely my specialty. That's for sure. I would say if I had a sub specialty, it's a
I
prior
know.
auth at this
Isn't
point.
that dumb that we have to like work with insurance companies to do this? I don't work with insurance, but I on purpose. Let's put it that way, on purpose. Like
Yeah,
I,
it's
I
a whole thing.
it's a
So
crazy, crazy thing.
if we know we want a GLP, right? And there's a lot of people that come in, like I've tried diet and exercise, especially in my perimenopause, menopause population. They have tried, most women have tried hundreds of diets, in their
Yeah,
lifetime, or some statistics at 75, some at 100. We do.
that's
We all
crazy.
have tried diets. And so they know. And so when they do, I say, okay, this is your insurance. And so you have to go online, you have to look up their insurance. I have them memorized at this point because I do so many. But the reality is, example, Medicaid in my state, they will cover for sleep apnea. They will cover for a failed 2-hour glucose tolerance test if someone has tried and failed metformin.
Oh wow.
So I have basically, it's almost algorithmic how I ask. Oh, have you ever been diagnosed with insulin resistance? Have you ever been on metformin? And then everyone's getting a 2-hour glucose tolerance test, a sleep study. I'm lucky because my husband's a pulmonologist. I can do take
That's
homes.
beautiful. So you can just refer out. That's amazing, by the way.
Not even refer out. I'm literally, because it's like our 3 offices, I'm literally texting them, hey, do we have a take home ready? Okay, great.
Nice.
Wow.
Call
That's
them. They're
great.
going to your office now to go pick it up. So they
Yeah.
Yeah.
go
Everyone,
sleep.
she's in New Jersey. Please go see her.
It's very, I'm lucky. It's just so lucky because Zepbound came in with that indication. So, right, for obstructive sleep apnea. So basically, big picture, I tell them there's two main, obviously there's more than two main, right? Drugs on the market, right? Semaglutide and tirzepatide. And I tell them, so we have Ozempic, Wegovy, and then for diabetes and weight loss respectively. And then we have Mounjaro and Zepbound for diabetes and weight loss respectively. And then I explain to them both with the right work will get the job done. There is one that obviously maybe beats one out for weight loss, but we want to just get you on one. So, because they come in, I need to be on this exact thing. And it's that mindset, right?
Yeah.
I know my dad did it with Byetta. So, if they can do it with Byetta, anyone can do it. So, I say, we have to know the insurance company, what's preferred. Then from there, what are the studies? So some of them, they want an A1C over 7, some A1C over 6.5, some the glucose tolerance test just needs to fail. That's it, which is
Interesting.
pretty easy. And
So it
so,
just depends on the insurance company what the requirement is.
I do all of it because I tell them I'm going to do all of it regardless today. And they go, why? And I say, because your insurance is going to change.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? So everyone's health insurance changes for different reasons. You have kids, you do a different insurance. Someone has a psychiatric disorder, you're gonna get a different insurance.
Yeah.
You go to retire, you're gonna have a different insurance. You change jobs, different insurance. So I want you at your worst. Today I know you're at your worst. I want to get it all. The other thing I do is when I do my glucose tolerance test, especially for women, there's different times in our cycle where we are more insulin resistant. So if I'm going to make them do that kind of icky test, I'm going to know their cycle, when I'm likely to get the result that's needed. And because I don't really think it's fair that if someone does a test and they say, oh, well, look good this day. Well, if a whole week out of the
Take your
year
time.
I'm insulin resistant, that's enough to have me lose a few pounds and then gain a few pounds. And so
That's the
I
luteal
do.
phase, right?
Yep, exactly. So I want to catch them exactly when I can. Yeah, and that's like the best thing to do. So I catch them at their worst. I tell them I don't even want to give you nutritional advice yet
Mhm.
because I want to get there. If I tell you what I'm going to tell you, right, then it's going to look so good sometimes, right?
Yeah,
So
you're like, we'll actually improve everything if we give you the nutrition part.
part,
What
and I don't want
about,
them to feel frustrated too. This is when it
yeah,
comes to motivation and momentum.
yeah,
Speed's the key, not like speedy weight loss, but speed plan. They
Yeah.
came to you for help. You know how much it takes for a patient to come in and ask for help?
it's a
They're
lot.
so busy. The cost of living's so high. No one has time for this to go to a doctor's office all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if they don't have time and they lose motivation, another year is going to go by.
Yep.
So I really lay it out like I'm going to be working on this prior auth, and then okay, we're going to get into this conversation because you do need a quick win
Yeah.
that you'll start, right after we finish this testing. And so kind of
Okay.
setting them up and understanding expectations and how quickly they can really reach their goals in a safe way, whether that be get off medications, lose weight, or just live their longest life.
Yeah. I just have a quick question about a specific patient population. What about with perimenopause and menopausal patients? I know there's a lot of women struggle in that age group, right? In that time of life, if you will. And to me, anecdotally, I think there needs to be more studies done on this. But like, it seems like GLPs would be a great time for a lot of these women. Like, where are we at with that?
I know certain companies are studying, example, PCOS and perimenopause, but there's not huge studies looking at that patient population yet. That being said, clinically, 110%.
Yeah.
This is like the best thing. So the same way, and I kind of explained it to them like this when they're starting to go through this. I explained PCOS because that's something that's has very kind of straightforward guidelines on, like we have certain hormones, we need to balance the hormones, and at the same time, we have insulin resistance.
Right.
Well, menopause and perimenopause are kind of like that. Basically, we're losing muscle mass, as we know, right? As early as our 30s
Right.
each year. And so when you have less muscle mass, right, you're losing your biggest insulin sensitizer.
Yep.
And like we said, insulin resistance causes weight gain. So to a degree, a lot of people who suffer from perimenopause and menopause are insulin resistant. And so that's why these GLPs work so well for them. And then on top of that, we know when we lose estrogen, that's what's causing a lot of these problems, right? And so if I can fix their hormones as well, if they're open to HRT or a good candidate,
Right.
I love that combination. It just works so
I
well.
was just gonna say that I think that's like the two punch, right? Like it's
It
something
is. It's
that
like boom, boom. It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
you're sleeping,
Yep.
right? Now
And
you're
sleep is a
feeling better.
huge thing, especially if you're perimenopause and menopause patients. That's like one of the biggest hindrances. And sometimes it's just like almost like a trickle down
There's a
thing.
downstream effect here.
Yeah.
If you're lacking sleep,
Yes.
you're even what you talked earlier about hunger hormones. If you lack in sleep, it's hard to control those hunger hormones.
Yeah.
Sleep's number one. I mean, we are such big believers in sleep in our practice. Actually, my husband and I, we wrote two books, and one was on the anti-inflammatory diet, and one's on sleep for that reason. Because
Yeah.
sleep has eluded us for so long, I think we both suffered from it. And so, especially in perimenopause, and menopause, you have a big biological reason why you can't sleep. So even if we can't do HRT or use, estrogen for whatever reason, there's drugs on the market like Veoza now that
Yes.
work
Yeah.
so well. I
Yeah.
mean, my patients love it. It's almost instantaneous. Within a couple of days, they're sleeping so much better. And then they're requiring less of a dose too. So we're having less of that failed GLP, GIP situation.
You'd almost think it makes sense for like Eli Lilly to pay for these studies
I would, yeah.
because you would make a lot of profit if it's like if perimenopausal women like become candidates for that, you'd make more profit because it's another category of people that can now buy and use your medicine.
I think my prediction, okay, so off label,
Yeah,
my off label
let's hear
prediction
these
in 20
predictions.
years is the biggest, gang buster drug that's going to come out is going to be an injectable with hormone therapy and a GLP, GIP in it.
Oh, that
That
would
is going
be
to be the
beautiful.
drug. It'll be
Yeah.
a beautiful drug.
Yes.
And I think they're going to subspecialize. I think you're going to have the right dosing for perimenopause, menopause sort of situation, right? And then for PCOS, it's right, it's different hormones.
Different. Yeah.
Same hormones, but different, right? In a different
Yeah.
way. And so I think I'm excited. These studies will be coming out, no doubt about it. I think there's going to be dementia studies coming out, these autoimmune studies coming out. People are already doing it on their own clinically in their offices, looking at these kind of results. And the
Yeah.
more clinicians I speak to, the more I'm realizing there is so much of that. And it's because it's really a drug that fights our obesogenic and toxigenic environment, right? It's lowering inflammation. People are choosing whole foods because of it, because,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? I mean, if you put someone on GLP and they eat buttery popcorn, right, from the movies, they're going to feel sick,
Yeah.
right?
And
You
then
see,
and they don't want, there's also, the neurotransmission there too, is that they don't have that desire anymore to be like, oh, I'm going to keep going, having snacks and having it. It works so well,
Even
I
with
think.
like alcohol, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
people that have issues
With
with,
addiction.
yeah,
Yeah. I think
yeah.
it's just like to me, it's like one of the greatest drugs that is out there. And so when I hear
God
patients,
bless Western
yeah,
medicine.
yeah,
Yeah.
when I hear patients saying, "Oh, I feel like I'm giving up," I'm like, "Why? You shouldn't feel that way. This is like an aid to make you more efficient."
Yeah.
Yeah, and definitely, and some people, I think I don't know, there's a big thing of being afraid to get like off of it, right? And something like
Yes.
this and this kind of mindset. And I really break that down to what's your risk factors, right? If you have this huge heart disease risk, or stroke risks, things like this, why would you want to get off,
Right.
right? If you
Right.
have a drug, that's true longevity medicine. Everyone's talking longevity
I
medicine.
know.
This is longevity medicine,
Yes. Yeah.
statins and a GLP. That's like the ultimate for Pat,
Yeah.
all of it. That's how you do it.
Yeah.
Don't make
So,
plaque, lower your inflammation. That's it.
Yep.
so what is the biggest mistake you see people make when they rely on the medication without really addressing lifestyle and even overeating patterns?
Oh, there's two problems that happen. One, they think I can eat whatever, but less. And what happens is they lose muscle, and muscle burns calories just by resting. And so, right? So if we can't burn calories, we're going to plateau. And then when we plateau, then they're going to get frustrated and then they're going to start to overeat again. And that's exactly what happens. So I think the biggest mistake is letting muscle go by either losing weight too quickly and not resistance training, and not having enough protein to support them. So really aiming for slow and steady weight loss is important. But then equally, if you overeat through the medication, we saw the same thing with gastric bypass and the gastric sleeve. When people fail those, it's the same idea. If they don't work on the overeating in a year and a half, the effects of the surgery start to wear off, and then you'll see it clear as rain. 3 years later, they're starting to regain the weight. And so it's the exact same thing with a GLP. If you don't work on the overeating, eventually you will eat through the medication, is the way I explain it. And I always do warn them, and I give the bariatric surgery example, that people fail it, and that's why. And so they have to stop overeating, and then they have to lose weight sustainably.
Interesting.
Yeah. Give me one second. I'm gonna let my dog out real quick.
Get a little break.
Perfect. I'm gonna chug some water.
I'm just curious because there is a psychological component here. Do you use CBT, kind of behavioral training, if you will, to help your patients, and where does that fit into this whole clinical picture?
Yep. So what I've done now is I've definitely structured how I tackle diabesity. It's kind of why I use the term, because I think when patients think of it as a program, the first thing I have to do is fix the sugar. It makes it feel more doable. So once we fix the sugar, in theory, the over hunger, if they're eating right, the four commandments, the protein, the water, the movement, the sleep, the over hunger should be kind of done, right? Especially if I get them off insulin and certain medications that make them hungry. So then if we can handle the over hunger and you're still wanting to eat, okay, now why? Is it something like, just a cue, like the couch at 8 p.m., I'm watching TV, I want to eat. It could be simple like a habit. It could be mindless eating. You're sitting with your kids and you're kind of picking off their plate.
Yeah.
I was guilty of that, for sure.
A
Mindless
lot of
eating,
moms are.
right? And so what we really
The
need to do
mac
is
and
like
cheese
we
tastes
put
good
it.
sometimes.
It's so I know, and it's like we don't think of it as much, but that's like 75 calories right here, a couple bites here and there. And then when you add that up, that's 12 pounds in a year, right? It can happen. So that's that part. But then, okay, now what's left? Say you're in the car, you've had like a crap day at work, and you feel really stressed or you have to make a deadline. Then, or we're dealing with relationships. It may not have anything to even do with food,
Right.
but dealing with your emotions is something we were never taught in school. We're taught to do pre-calculus, calculus, right? But we're not taught taxes and we're not taught how to deal with our own thoughts or our emotions. And so, big picture, us as a species, we're the only species who can control our thoughts. So we have like our circumstances around us, right? Our environment, God derived, situation derived from our own previous things we've done, right? Whatever you believe. And those circumstances lead to certain thoughts in our mind. And those thoughts lead to our emotions, and those emotions lead to our actions, and therefore the results that manifest from there. And so, and this is not like new. This isn't my theory. This is like Aaron Beck, 1960s, CBT, how it was derived. And so, what I noticed is, at least for me, when I was stressed about anything, it could be a relationship, it could have been school, it doesn't really matter. But if I was thinking about that, food is a coping mechanism, right? It gives us dopamine.
Mhm.
And so, what we need to do is instead of focusing on trying to change the situation so we don't overeat or eat when we're not supposed to, um, is really kind of taking control over the food as opposed to food controlling us. And so, the way we do this is we take whatever thought it was and we try to neutralize it really simply. We're not trying to make the situation or circumstance something untrue. We don't want an untrue thought, it has to actually fit. But you basically, I have my patients once a month write a sheet of all the thoughts in their head, just write them down, get it out, and then pick one you feel is doable to work on. Pick the easiest one and try to neutralize it. So, say it's, I have this deadline at work, I'm so stressed out. I'll change it to worst case scenario. Okay, say I just don't do my work. What's the worst thing that will happen? Really,
Right.
what's the worst case, right? And then we just try to aim for a neutral thought that if you kind of put it on like a cap, it feels right. Okay,
Mhm.
great. And that will lead to a more neutral emotion and usually less overeating. And so that's kind of the ticket. If you do 30 thought loops in a month, your life will change. And it took me
Interesting.
a while to realize that, really big intricacy of your emotions and food, and how that's related.
I think it's interesting to even be talking about this because, you know, in medicine, even the thought process of seeing an obese patient has changed over the last several years, right? And so we used to just think, well, if the patient thinks or works harder and exercises more and diets more, but this just points to the complexity of this physiologic process, right? This pathology that's going on. There's so many components, and even to have that psychological component and that where you actually have to do some kind of behavioral training in order to overcome some of the psychological aspects of that. I think it just points to how complex these disease processes are. And I think that that's something that's, not addressed enough on social media. We just think, oh, well, just do this simple thing. And it's like, no, medicine and disease, especially obesity, is so nuanced and complex that you can't just throw, you know, um, eat less calories and you'll be fine. That
Yeah.
might work temporarily, right? But you're not addressing the entire pathology of what that disease process actually looks like.
Oh yeah, you're not even addressing. So eat less calories. Yeah, that will work, but you're having trouble doing the eat less calories. So what's going on? You have to fix what's going on there before you can actually eat less calories. So you actually stick with it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's very, very complex.
It
Um, we
is.
we do want to be very cognizant of your time. We are running over an hour, and we know you're a very busy person. So I do want to wrap this up with one final question, if you still have time for it.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
if so, someone's listening right now and wants to live the longest, healthiest life possible, what like lab markers and habits and interventions matter the most in your view in particular?
Yeah. So I would say, I guess starting with lab markers, particularly if we're worried about something like insulin resistance or not, I would check. So definitely get an A1C. If it's somewhere even close to a certain level, get a 2-hour glucose tolerance test. If you are diabetic, get a C-peptide. It's the best marker to look at your insulin reserve. So, meaning, do you need insulin or not is a really important thing to know. So, I would tell someone always get a C-peptide level. Always get your cholesterol panel at the right age appropriate time, or if you have a high risk, even earlier. Aim for an LDL that fits your risks. So, meaning if you're very high risk, you may be aiming under 60 or 55. If you're diabetic, under 70, for that LDL, not just the 100 that shows up on the lab. So, those are my big labs for sure that we
That's
want to
an
check.
important distinction too. And again, that's where nuance comes in,
It's all
where,
nuanced. You
yeah,
need to
and
see
so
someone who knows what they're doing.
exactly.
So, yeah, get those labs and then don't go to a clinic online that they don't tell you you're going to see someone who's been trained in this, right? And they exist. I can't believe it. But that's actually how I got more on social media. I realized, wow, my patients are telling me about these clinics doing these things. And I said, they have no business doing, And so
Well, they're not even treating the right things. They're looking
they're
at,
not treating the
their
right things.
vitamin D instead of looking at their like overall LDL risk and how that
Yep.
fits into their cardiovascular panel,
100%. And then habit wise, the stuff we know about that isn't nuanced, right? Don't smoke, cut back on drinking if you're drinking, cut it out entirely if you can pull it off, right? And so I'm not here to pass judgment, but there is, alcohol is just not good for us, period, right? And not coming from a place of I don't drink at all, you know what I mean? So not from a place of judgment, but it's one of the best things you could do. Definitely strength train and move your body and sleep, and get adequate nutrition. If you restrict too much, that is the biggest cause of binging at night. So that's a big message I do a lot as well. So I would say those are my big ones.
Yeah, that's great. And that's great information for our listeners and definitely can help a lot of people out there. Dr. Yaz, we really, really appreciate your time. Look, this is a Sunday. You're a family person, so we really appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to do this and give our listeners a lot of good information. There's a lot of gold nuggets here, so I'm gonna have fun with this, putting out the content on social media, taking it from here. So you made my job easier by giving us all these gold nuggets.
Yeah. Where can we find you? Just put it out there.
Yeah, so I'm under diabetes_MD on Instagram, or if you just look up my name, Yasmine Elamir, you can also find me on YouTube from that, or diabetes_MD. And I do everything Diabesity on that, basically to give everything I have. Saves me time in the office and helps people who can't see me in the office. So I love it.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. So listeners, please give her a follow. She puts out great content. And she won't be stealing any more of my content. She fired her editor.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks so much for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Yep.
So on behalf of Balanced Bodies, we just want to say thank you for joining us on this episode of the Balanced Bodies Blueprint.
We are committed to bringing valuable content. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd greatly appreciate it if you can take a moment and like it and leave a 5-star review.
On Apple, just go to the show, scroll down to the bottom and rate it there. If you're on Spotify, go to the show's page, click the 3 dots, and you can rate it there as well.
And if you believe in the power of knowledge, share this episode on your social media to try and get the information out there to as many people as possible.
And as you navigate your own path towards better health, remember that Balanced Bodies is forever in your corner. See you all next week.
The podcast content may include discussions of medical topics and health-related information. However, the information provided should not be considered exhaustive or complete, and it should not be relied upon as a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment.